Part 1. So you want to sell your art. When you make the conscious decision to sell your art, the first thing I urge you to do is to get clear about your mission and your intention. One thing I consider about presenting my art to audiences is what I want them to leave with and what I want them to feel. My mission is to tell my stories and the stories of others with passion, integrity, and with respect to my truth. Sometimes I want the audience to share in my anger or bitterness and to remember a time when they felt those emotions. Sometimes I want them to feel joy and gratitude. My brand is built on emotion, getting down to the micro bits of it and getting curious about what goes on in our internal and external lives. So, regardless of what you're selling, visual art, sculpture, poetry, prose, music, theater, photography, whatever it is, get really clear on what your intention is. And it doesn't have to look a certain way either. There are some artists whose intent is to awe and outright shock. Some wake up in the morning to piss people off. Some have built empires on sad girl music. It's your art. You get to decide what you want to do in the world. Once you decide what you're doing, the next step is to identify your product menu. Let's take a look at my website, www.ashleyhayes.com, and take a look at my product menu. Under the Contact tab, you can see what I'm available for. My product menu includes poetry performances, poetry slam, master of ceremony services, I'll MC your event, keynote address, poetry craft and performance workshops, marketing writing and appearances, creative nonprofit consulting, creative grant writing, and educational video production and consulting. My largest revenue generating services are my 60-minute feature performance set, which is a mix of poetry, interludes, and comedy. My 30-minute feature set, my 60-minute workshop, and my services as an MC or master of ceremonies, hosting open mics, special events, and poetry slams. After that is songwriting, marketing, writing and appearances, and then film appearances. I also have another product menu, which can be located under the Shop tab. There, you can purchase my book, Ashley Hayes Apparel. You can even book me for manuscript consulting and what I like to call pick my brain sessions or poetry coaching. I charge for this because I believe it's valuable. I fundamentally believe that an hour of my time will improve your career and your creative practice. You can also see some limited edition merchandise runs I've done, including greeting cards and even a wine partnership with City Winery. Identifying your product menu is one of the most important steps in establishing your creative career. For most performers, we're selling sets. Comedy usually happens in 30-minute or 1-hour sets. Poetry for colleges is usually an hour. For local events, it's usually about 20 minutes. Are you selling physical items like paintings and sculptures? Are you selling prints? Are you selling videography services or graphic design? Is your most popular product flyers or websites? I recommend having these clearly listed out and getting clear on how much they cost. We'll get more in depth into pricing later in the course, but one thing I will say now is to consider cost and volume. If your website design fee is $500, how many do you need to sell monthly to make a living? Remember, the higher the price, the more you can assume that volume will go down. I have some services that are $1,000, and I'll do a lot more of those than I will my $3K, $5K, or even $10K or more services. Later, we'll talk about finding your markets, but these are high-level things to think about. You've got to know what you're selling. Now that you've got your menu, you'll need to figure out branding and packaging. One thing about branding is that you can expect it to change over time. I've been doing poetry since I was literally a child. So the first 10 years of my career, my brand was family friendly, coming of age, and imaginative. Now, 20 years later, I'm moving more into my Sasha Fierce stage. Now you can expect more liberties with adult material. Although I still have versions of my menu that are family friendly, you can expect to see both suits and corsets on my Instagram. I'm an Aquarius, so my brand range is expansive. But fundamentally, people know that they're going to get thoughtful work, reflective of my unique experiences and our collective experiences. What is your brand going to be built on? That sort of ties into your intention. My promo is often super bright and colorful to indicate joy and lightheartedness. My brand colors are bright purple, lime green, and white, balanced with a bit of black and gray. It allows me the range to go really bright when I need to, or to go really classic with hints of color. Yes, I have poetry and art that deviates from that. That is angry, that's bitter, but overall, it's uplifting. Now, there are some folks whose brands are more seductive or even dark. Your marketing should reflect the energy that you want your art to convey. Your name is also a part of your branding and packaging. At my big age, I'm considering changing my performance name. It happens pretty often where a name an artist picked when they were younger no longer serves them. For me, it's less about my name not serving me, but more about wanting to be more aligned in the direction of my work. I haven't made any decisions yet, but it is something to think about. Your name is the first thing people will learn about you. So we've covered getting clear on what you want to say, building out your menu, and packaging yourself. Now we've got to talk about identifying your audience. One question you will constantly be trying to answer as an entrepreneur is, who are you going to sell your art to? For me, there are so many answers. My first audience is myself. I have to like my work and fundamentally believe in it before I can expect anyone else to. Then after that, my audience is people I know or people I'm in community with. Usually if I produce a show or release a book, I know the first 100 sales are to my mom and them. People who support me because they love me personally. Then after that is people who look like me and share similar experiences. My work is for Black millennial non-men first. Then after that is usually Black men, then millennials of color and other races and other genders, then college-age students, then people raised in the American South, regardless of age, and of course, general lovers of poetry who find my work. Audience building is key because having art is one thing, but you need someone to engage in it for it to be effective. That means when building your menu, you need to know what these people want and what they can afford. That's why having a range of offerings can be beneficial. I have items that range from $5 to $100 as far as merchandise. Usually my show ticket price caps at about $25, and then I charge corporations and institutions much more because they will be offering my services to their audience free of charge. In part 2, we'll dive into the art of audience building, so stay tuned for that. Once you identify your audience, you'll want to identify your peers. Whose audiences overlap with yours? Who are your colleagues? Who's your competition? I fundamentally believe that there is enough business and work to go around. So I like to think of everybody as my colleagues. But I'm aware that there are some times where they will be my competition, and I like to know what I'm getting myself into. For me, my peers are often older than me or in the same age range. I connect with local poets, but it was actually Poetry Slam that helped connect me to poets on a national level. My career was influenced heavily by Poetry Slam. I had the opportunity to compete outside of my city and state and to see what other people were doing. It helped me get clearer on what still wasn't being said or ways in which I could provide unique approaches. I know at least 20 people I can call at any given time to talk about what I go through as a poet and as an entrepreneur. Realistically, I have dozens of peers making a living practicing their art. Start to get to know your local artists. Start to invest in conferences and out-of-state networking opportunities. This will better you as an individual and as an artist. This also means finding mentors and conducting field research. Who walked the path before you and can help guide you? For me, I had poets like John Good, Asia Sampson, Georgia Me, Queen Sheba, Andrea Gibson, Amina Brown, and so many others that do what I'm doing right now. They taught me what they knew and laid out possible paths for me. When I first decided I wanted to practice art for a living, I started by going to poets' websites who I knew were doing it. I examined the careers of artists like Saul Williams and Jill Scott and Common and where they started. Almost all of them seemed to start at a local open mic. Don't be afraid to send a message to someone you admire. Don't be afraid to offer them a nominal fee in exchange for their time and expertise. Sometimes the most valuable information I've gotten over the years has been given over coffee or dinner. Make solid connections with those who are doing it already. The last thing I'll tell you about selling your art is that you need to understand how your markets work. Most of my income is made outside of my home state. There are artists who make more internationally than they do domestically. So I recognize that selling my art will mean traveling and maximizing opportunities in places that can afford my work. The unfortunate truth is that the South doesn't value art the way that it should, even in a major city like Atlanta. At one point, Georgia ranked 48 out of 50 states when it came to funding artistic opportunities. That means if I truly want to make a living, I need to tour. Many artists find that they need to tour. There's a lucky few who don't have to leave home for income. Mainly artists in places like New York and LA are able to find more consistent work near home. Remember, I mentioned colleges are my biggest market. This inevitably means that income is seasonal. Apart from a rare summer workshop or performance, most of my work for colleges and universities is done during the semester, which means I have the summers off. This is a seasonal market. That means that during the summer, I try to perform or work anywhere that's not a college. Summers, I'm doing festivals, local shows, more film work, more voiceover work, more of anything else not college. Some artists may find that they have year-round markets. Graphic design is a lot like that because there's always something from holidays to promotions that need to be run. Photography and videography tend to be in demand year-round. Maybe you run a craft business built around Christmas items and you make your living between October and January and take the rest of the year off or to do other things. There's so many ways to make a living, but you've got to understand how your markets work. Many artists rely on grant funding, and that works on a calendar. Most grants are open for application in the spring and close by July. Then artists get about a year to spend the money if they're awarded. You'll eventually get into an annual rhythm or flow. Our flow revolves around spring and, quite frankly, Black History Month. I book most of my shows between Martin Luther King Day in January and the end of National Poetry Month in April. Then we know we need a nest egg for summer and then go back to colleges in the fall. So we spend the summer taking risks and working for organizations that may not be able to afford my college rate or doing more conference or festival work. It's all a part of understanding your markets. That concludes part one. We got a lot done already. And to recap this section, we covered gaining clarity about your mission and intention, identifying your product menu, effective packaging and branding, identifying your audience, finding your peers and identifying potential mentors, and understanding your markets. Next up, we're going to dive into the art of audience building. I'll see you in part two.